The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We can be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring forever. All my aunts, uncles, and parents, save one, have crossed over. Many of my colleagues, teachers, and friends have also passed on. My children live far away, and I reside alone in a remote part of Colorado on 44 acres of wooded land. Yet I'm rarely lonely. Every being I know or have ever known, and some I don't, are just a frequency shift away. Every life that has ever touched me, for better or for worse, is still imprinted in my field to access at will. I'm not unique in this. It's the same for all of us, but most never find the connection. My ability to commune has not been without its cost. Being a passionate person by nature, when I love very deeply. Every time a loved one passed, I had to move through the debilitating grief of their loss. It required serious soul-searching to forgive them and myself for all of our trespasses and failings, real and imagined. Only then could I truly stand in deep gratitude for having known them. Only then could I access them on the other side. Every loss has forever changed me. There's a shamanic concept known as the joy and sorrow sine wave. Some Celtic traditions believe that only through the tempering obtained through fully embracing both joy and sorrow in equal measure could the true shamanic gift be accessed. It's a lonely path, as few can stand beside us in our suffering and not interfere. Likewise, few can celebrate our joy without triggering their unprocessed grief. From childhood, we're taught to minimize both our joy and our sorrow. The free flow of expression that children display triggers unprocessed emotions in the adults around them. The denied feelings are then projected onto the child, and soon children learn it's not safe, or at least not accepted, to fully express. As a result, we end up with our emotional realm chock full of expressed and therefore unprocessed feelings. The frequency of every emotion expressed by others reactivates these unprocessed places. This drives us out of the present moment and into our past trauma. We tend to project our past hurts onto our current lives, living in reaction to the past rather than taking action in the now. Anything that drives us out of the present moment separates us from life and all therein. It's only when fully present in the now that one can access all time and therefore all of our relations. In embracing both joy and sorrow, we oscillate from one to the other, triggering ever-deepening levels of both until we access depths few ever touch, that place where there's no discernible difference between the two. It's a place truly in the moment, in the now, where all things flow through us, but we identify with nothing. From a place of absolute neutrality, we can freely shift our awareness and gain access to those who have passed on and those yet to come. We can touch into the wisdom and the knowledge inherent in life. This is the magic of the shamanic way. The more I develop this ability, the greater my peace, as though those I love are forever with me, even when they're far away or no longer in physical form. I can also stand solid and unwavering beside my loved ones in their hour of greatest joy or sorrow and not falter. Through forgiveness, gratitude, and processing, we gain the frequency mobility to shift our awareness, which grants us unlimited access to our inner sanctum, where all of our relations reside forever. Our guest this hour is Ashley Davis Bush. She's a psychotherapist in private practice in southern New Hampshire, with over 25 years' experience in the mental health field. Ashley is an international best-selling author of 6 self-help books, including Transcending Loss and Hope and Healing for Transcending Loss. I will introduce Ashley, and together we'll explore the grieving process, embracing joy and sorrow, and how our relationship with a loved one can continue even after their death. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Ashley Davis Bush, psychotherapist and author of Hope and Healing for Transcending Loss. She can be found on her website, www.ashleydavisbush.com. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm delighted to be talking with you.
You've been helping people move through grief for over 25 years now. How, and for that matter, why did you get into the field?
That's a good question. Basically, it's not the traditional route. Many people enter this field with a desire to help grievers because they themselves had a lot of early losses. That wasn't my particular path, although I just found when I was in graduate school, the very first client I was assigned to as a budding therapist was a grief client. In fact, her sister had been murdered. And I just connected with her so strongly and felt that I understood the process in a way that was almost inexplicable. It really sort of felt like it was coming from another place, if you will, that I just felt I'm called to do this. I just had an immediate awareness that this was part of my purpose in life, and I decided to follow the calling. So I've been doing that for the last couple of decades.
My goodness, it sounds like a true calling, and it's not an easy one, I would bet.
Well, you'd be surprised because obviously the material is very sad, often very tragic. People have very deep emotion around loss and love. But for me, it's really a positive experience to walk with someone in that profound a way on their process and their path, but also to really tune into the fact that love is eternal. And there's so much more going on than what we can see or understand. So I actually really feel fed by it because it helps me embrace my life on a day-to-day basis and to really appreciate what I have while I have it, and also to understand that even when people seem to leave the planet, we're still connected to them and are still in relationship with them.
How would you define grief?
I would call grief a natural response to loss. And when I say a natural response, we have a sorrow and a sense of bereftness, if that's a word, because our attachments to people are so strong, and not just to people, I should say, to pets and to other kinds of relationships than you might even imagine. I actually worked with someone who was heartbroken after his housekeeper died, but it made sense because he was very attached to her. He had known her for 30 years. He saw her every week. They had a very strong connection. He lived alone and was sort of a hermit, if you will, so he was very attached to her. So it's a response of sorrow when an attachment seems to be severed. The good news is that part of the process of working it through is realizing that the attachment really has not been severed, and that if you think of relationships being emotional, physical, and spiritual, when the physical leaves, you still have the emotional and the spiritual.
That's beautifully stated. It's certainly been my experience, but then I work shamanically, and so there's less of a space between me and the esoteric. So ultimately, what's the difference between a person that compartmentalizes their grief and simply goes on, and one that takes time to move through it?
Yep, that's an excellent question. And in fact, we live in a society that really encourages the latter. We want people to move through it quickly. We like quick fixes. We like pills to pop. We like distractions. We don't like to feel pain. And yet, pain has a purpose when you're grieving. It's absolutely required. Even if you already tune into the spiritual aspects of it, you still have to feel the physical loss because we are humans having a human experience. What starts to happen is for people who are very quick to compartmentalize and move on, the grief lodges in their body in some way. And unfortunately, it can often end up as an illness. It can make people more accident prone. It can ultimately lead to depression. You pay a price for not allowing yourself to grieve. For people who do allow the process to sort of move through them like a current, like a wave, and they don't resist it and they let it flow, they're able to move on with more joy and more peace. So the people who think they're like cheating the process, they're really just sweeping it under the carpet, and of course there's a lot of dirt collecting under the carpet, and it gets you one way or another. The good news, though, is that grieving can happen any time. So sometimes I work with people who the loss may not have been recent. It might have been a decade or more ago. And it waits for you, and it still can be fresh. So even though a loss may have happened 10 or 20 or more years ago, once you decide you're ready to start grieving it, you absolutely can. Time is on your side that way because it's waiting for you.
So it just kind of hunkers down and waits. How about when holidays come up? Okay, so you've gone a year without your loved one, and the next time their birthday comes up, or the next time Christmas comes, or whatever, it's like it stirs it all up again. Is that a sign that you're not done grieving, or what is that exactly?
No, it's not a sign that you're off track or that you need to do more. Really, those are just tangible reminders of the love and loss, and they're really trigger times. So sometimes it won't be a holiday, but maybe it's the time of year that the person passed or some other event, and they may not even consciously remember it, but their body remembers it based on the season. Some people start getting depressed in the spring, and they don't remember why, or they don't know why, and then they don't remember that, oh, yes, this is coming up on the angelversary, I call it. But in fact, we have triggers all the time. So the holidays and departure days are sort of obvious ones, anniversaries, personal holidays. But a lot of times grievers will tell me it's not the expected trigger time. It's something else that will trigger them, such as a song or a smell or just a rainy Wednesday, and there's no explanation, and they get triggered. So I call these grief bursts, and it's almost as if grief just bursts through a little bit, almost like it's just a little storm cloud. And that can happen for years and years and years. And it doesn't mean that you haven't grieved efficiently or well. It's just the nature of the process. You can absolutely be healing and moving forward in very positive ways, but you can still have a day or a time of year that just the burst comes through and you have to revisit the grief.
So it's kind of always with you in a way, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing. It really is. It's a lifelong process. Now, that's not to say that a person's going to be in acute, severe pain forever. And so I try to help people understand that the intensity of the feeling will somewhat fade. The frequency of the bursts will diminish and spread out. There's absolutely healing that can happen and does happen every single day, but at the same time, it really is a lifelong process. Because you're integrating it, it's imprinting within you, and you can't change that. But in fact, that's not such a bad thing, because it means that you're still connected to your loved one. It means that love is eternal. It means that this is just a very deep, soul-touching process. And some people actually go the other way. They don't want to let go of the grieving or the pain because they're afraid that they'll lose their loved one even more. So what I say to that is, no, it's okay to continue to find joy, to smile, to turn your attention towards people who are still on this planet, and that doesn't diminish your connection either. So it's this lifelong kind of balancing act of the grief coming to the forefront and then receding to the background over and over and over.
So you mentioned earlier that that if you don't grieve, you end up storing it in your body. What are the physical effects of grief? How can we tell when we've done that?
A lot of times it comes out in various aches and pains, and of course the most dramatic way, and I don't have scientific evidence on this, but it wouldn't surprise me. It's my belief that cancer is in some ways an unprocessed grieving process or some kind of unprocessed emotion. That's not to say that every person with cancer, didn't grieve, but the point is when we harbor emotions and stuff them down in our body, there's going to be an impact. So yes, sickness, aches and pains, sometimes just a sluggishness or a lack of energy and overall sort of heavy fatigue. I certainly would suggest if someone's experiencing those symptoms, they should go to their doctor and check it out. And if they're not finding something, then go to a therapist and start talking it out.
What about grief and depression? How do they go hand in hand, and how do they differ?
That is such a compelling question, and there are people in my field who sort of debate that, because obviously depression is a very, very serious illness and should be treated as such. And yet I think that especially acute grieving, and when I say acute grieving, I mean usually in the first year or two when it's just very, very raw, when you're constantly on the verge of tears, when you're in what's called the grief fog, and that means you can't concentrate, it's hard to read, you lose your keys, you're just like scatterbrained, you can't sort of keep your focus. So that's part of acute grief. I just got myself off track. What was the question,
okay.
Gwilda?
We were talking about grieving and depression.
Oh, yes, depression, of course. See, it's almost like I have grief fog. I'm just like ADD going off some other trail. But it mimics this acute grief, this early phase of grief, actually mimics the exact same symptoms of depression. So you may have trouble sleeping, you may have trouble eating, you have all this fog, you can't concentrate, the things that used to bring you joy no longer do. So I would say that depression and grief are essentially the same thing initially. But what starts to happen is over time, if you have a clinical depression, those symptoms never seem to resolve. You stay stuck in them. Whereas the natural healing process from a loss, is that you would start to see improvement in those symptoms. One of the issues is that because we like to take a pill to not feel or to get better, to not hurt so much, doctors are very quick to prescribe antidepressants, even if the loss was recent. And I try to help people not go that road if they don't need to, because you want the natural healing process to unfold, and sometimes an antidepressant will mask that and essentially delay it. But on the other hand, if someone is suicidal or really can't get out of bed for a long time, you need to treat it.
We're going to have to take a break. I want to take up with the antidepressants and how that affects the grieving process on the other side of this break. We'll return to our discussion You are listening to The Science of Magic. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Do you want to hear more? Previous broadcasts of innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. Visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Ashley Davis Bush, psychotherapist and author of Hope and Healing for Transcending Loss. Her website is www.ashleydavisbush.com. Ashley, before the break, we were talking about antidepressants and how they might interfere with the grieving process. Would you mind going on with that?
Oh, I'd be happy to. The caveat is that I'm not antidepressants, as it were. Some people are really helped by them. But I'm not pro-antidepressants, because what they tend to do is they pull up your bottom so that you're not feeling quite the depths of your sorrow and despair. Now, of course, that sounds like a good thing, right? Why not pull up your bottom? Who wants to feel it? The problem is that in order to really get through the process and continue to heal, you need to feel the deep sorrow. The other piece to that, and you mentioned this in your lovely introduction, I think you called it the joy-sorrow shamanic way, and that's exactly right. If you don't learn to tolerate deep sorrow, you actually are not going to be able to access great joy. In other words, if you truncate one end of the emotional spectrum, you're going to truncate the other end as well. So if you take antidepressants, which are going to raise your bottom so you're kind of numbed a bit to the deep sorrow, you're kind of numbing out to all of life. So they might be a temporary fix if you can't function, if you're just unable to get up and do what you need to do, but they shouldn't be a long-term solution in terms of the grieving process. But again, that is distinct from depression, as we were talking about, that naturally the symptoms of grief do start to heal, or they should. Otherwise, it is actually a clinical depression.
What do you think the relationship is between clinical depression and unprocessed grief?
Well, that's a curious thought. I'm sure for many people that might be the case. For other people, it's not. It has to do with your biochemistry and your genetics and whether you have anger turned inwards. A lot of times they talk about that depression is sort of an inner anger that's turned in towards yourself. But I have no doubt that many people never do their grieving work and they get stuck. And so it could really look in that way. There are a couple of ways of being stuck, and one of them is bitterness and another one is depression. So I'm sure there's some percentage of people with clinical depression that in fact are sitting on a lot of unprocessed grief.
Mm. You know, you mentioned that other people tend to be really uncomfortable around a grieving person. What advice do you have for those trying to support someone in grief?
Isn't that true? We almost avoid grievers like the plague. I've had so many people tell me their friends sort of disappear. They run into someone at the grocery store and they turn away, mostly because we are so uncomfortable with deep sorrow and pain. And it's almost as if it's contagious. If you're grieving, I might start grieving if I hang out with you. But for those who really want to show up and be there for a loved one who's grieving, the best thing you can do is listen. They say we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should be listening twice as much as we're speaking. And to be able to go to someone and say, tell me how you're feeling. How are you really feeling? I'm here and I can listen to your experience. That's surprisingly rare because most people don't want to hear any answer other than I'm fine. The other thing you can do, especially early for someone grieving, is share your memories of that person. So that's a real gift. If you knew the person who, like say you have a friend and her husband died and you knew the husband, tell her some stories of what you remember about him. And that's a real gift. Also, I think gestures that are just thoughtful, like showing up with some candies or a potted plant or a candle or a book, those are thoughtful. They mean a lot. But what gets in the way is if you try to include too many platitudes, like, oh, you know, God needed another angel, or just whatever it is that people say. Oh, you'll get over this. You can find another husband, as if people are replaceable. Which of course they're not. But it's almost better to stumble and fumble and say something that might be hurtful, but at least to show your intention is, I'm trying to help you. You can also say, I don't know what to say. I have no idea what to say. I don't know how to comfort you, but I'm just going to give you a hug. And also hugs can be more valuable than words.
Yeah, that beautiful contact, person to person, heart to heart. Sometimes it's just the best medicine there is, isn't it?
That's right, the nonverbal healing, because words fail us when we're in this kind of intensity.
How do you recommend the grieving person deals with the discomfort of others?
Well, some people get angry about someone else's discomfort, or if they say what they perceive to be the wrong thing. There can be a lot of anger. It's a little bit misdirected because I think they're just angry in general, angry that their loved one's gone. They might be angry at God. They might be angry at themselves. So it's very easy to project that anger onto someone else who seems to be uncomfortable with them. But what I try to advise people to do is have compassion. I'm a big believer in self-compassion and compassion for others. So just have compassion for them because they don't know what to say, they're uncomfortable, they don't know what to do, having some sense of they just don't know, they haven't walked in these shoes before. They did, they might feel differently. And in terms of spreading compassion towards those who are uncomfortable and don't know what to say, I really try to help grievers have compassion for themselves. I think we live in a world where self-compassion is often confused with selfishness or weakness or just being a wimp. But in fact, self-compassion, which is literally just directing a tender kindness towards yourself, putting your hand over your heart and just saying, wow, this is hard. Feeling your own sense of frailty and your sense of common humanity, because that's the other thing, big piece about grief. Everyone thinks they're alone, but you're not alone. Grief has been going on through all of human history. You're connected to anyone, anywhere, in any time in history who has lost someone. So just sort of having a sense that you're part of this great chain of humanity and just being tender with yourself, because it's just not easy to grieve. It's hard, hard work.
How can we commune with our departed loved ones? You say that that's possible. And even if we aren't mediums or don't have shamanic training, how do you help people commune with the ones that have left?
Yeah. Well, some people don't want to, and they find that frightening, and that's fine, because you certainly don't need to force people on that path. Grieving really opens up a sense of not knowing, of having people sift through their beliefs, having them sit with mystery. But at the same time, a lot of people are open to signs. They want signs. They're looking for signs. It makes them feel connected. And in doing this work for 25 years, I have heard of so many different kinds of signs, from things in nature, like birds appearing in unusual places, butterflies, sort of meaningful symbolic animals that suddenly appear in your path. And electronic signs are very common, like lights going on and off, computers getting shut down, finding pennies. I know many people that find sort of pennies from heaven kind of thing. So I think for people who want that and are open to it, just literally asking for signs. Show me you're okay. Show me you're here. But then there's also a process that I recommend to people called automatic writing. And that has to do with you write a letter to your loved one in your dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, write it in your right hand. Just talking to them, telling them what you're feeling, maybe asking questions, telling them what's going on in your process. And then the second part is to have them write a letter back to you, and you do this with your non-dominant hand, say your left hand. And it sounds kind of strange because how are they writing to you? But I have found over and over again that if someone can get in a place of openness, of acceptance, and non-resistance, and they use their left hand, something comes through. Something gets channeled, for lack of a different word, that they actually start to get a letter from their loved one that answers questions and tells them things. It comes in a different voice, and they really feel like they've connected their loved one. And it can be a beautiful process. I have a client whose son was murdered, and she does automatic writing with him every single week and stays very, very connected to him. And she also learns a lot from him. So
that's amazing. We're going to have to pick this up
ritual
again on the other side of a break. But I do want to go on with how do we stay connected to our loved ones when they've already crossed. We'll be back on the flip side of this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic, the place where our altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. You can always listen to previous broadcasts on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to our world. Our website is www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Ashley Davis Bush, psychotherapist and author of Hope and Healing for Transcending Loss. Her website is www.ashleydavidbush.com. Ashley, before the break, we were talking about how to stay connected with our loved ones after they've crossed, and you were coming up with some lovely suggestions. Do you have some more of those for us?
Yes, I do. Another one, a frequent way that those on the other side of the veil visit is through dreams. And they're really more than just dreams. It's a kind of visitation. So if you haven't received one, you can ask for one. And just say that you're really open to it and you're willing to receive it, and that if they can, and they will, if they can, come visit them in a dream. The interesting thing is that even if you don't believe that they're on the other side and can do this, you have nothing to lose by being open to it. Like, why not? Just be open to the possibility. And if you start to be open to possibility, then messages can get through. Of course, another just very overt way is to go to a psychic or a medium and basically pay to have someone channel them. I know many psychics and mediums who do that very beautifully, very authentically. So when you want to connect, there are ways to do it. And as I said, even if you're skeptical, it doesn't hurt you to keep an open mind and just be open to possibility, because you just don't know. And that's the other piece to grieving, is that it really can open you up to a sense of life and death and feeling like there's so much more than we can see and know and understand. And so there's just a broader sense of something more, of mystery in the universe, and that can be exciting.
Before we get too far into this last segment, I'd like to have you tell people where they can find your wonderful books.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, they are available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com, local bookstores, and you can also access them on my website, AshleyDavisBush.com. And I have written 6 books with another one coming out, but 2 of them are particularly for grievers. And 2 are about inner peace, which is another aspect that grievers are looking for, because, again, we were talking about the pain of the process earlier in our time together, and yet on the other side of that pain, there really is a greater sense of love and a possibility for what I call transcendence. And transcendence is really about gaining a larger perspective, to realize that there's more than meets the eye, and there's also more in your life than just this loss, that it's a piece in the puzzle of your life.
You know, there's a shamanic concept, it's Celtic, where they say there's 3 steps to moving through grief. First is they sing the song, they wail. And then the next song they sing, the harpers, it's called the 3 harpers. The next song that they play is one of sheer joy, but the process is not complete until they've played the lullaby. And that sounds like what you're talking about here.
The lullaby, I like that. Yes,
that's the
coming
piece,
to a peacefulness. That's the peacefulness. The other way I think people find a path of transcendence is to reinvest in some new cause. And this is really interesting when people do this. In other words, you either start volunteering, you start a scholarship fund, you start a foundation. We have many examples of those. Make-A-Wish Foundation was started by a bereaved parent. Mothers Against Drunk Driving was started by a bereaved mother. That you can take a lot of the feelings that you have and channel them into something productive and good. And there's a peacefulness in that, too, when something tragic leads to something positive, and a kind of intentional insistence that that is the case. Even if it doesn't have to be a national organization, it could be a choice to give back in some way, become a hospice volunteer, work with, in a homeless shelter. Just a sense of, in honor of my loved one, I'm going to use it to be of service.
Transmutation at its finest. No discussion on death and the bereaved is complete without discussing ghosts. So what's been your experience with your grieving clients and ghosts of their loved ones?
Well, I would say that in general, other kinds of communication come through, but I certainly have seen people have visions of a sort of ghostly, ethereal being. I think it often will scare people. They'd rather see, a bird fly across their window than to see the ghost of their loved one. And yet there are some people who have no problem with spirits or sort of ethereal beings. So I guess if you're open to it, invite it. And if you're frightened of it, don't worry, they probably won't come to you anyway, because that starts, fear starts to make people behave in different ways. But I believe in ghosts, so I think that the spirit realm and the earth realm are not as far apart as we imagine.
Do you think that we hold on to the dead when we don't grieve properly, and and release them? Do you think that kind of holds them here?
Well, I've actually wondered that myself, because I hear that they have certain work to do on the other side, and they're doing their spiritual work. And it's true, you don't want to tether them here and have them caught in some ways. But I think that because the energy and the time is not linear, we can't really understand it. Maybe people can be simultaneously in different places at the same time. Who knows? I don't think it really holds spirits back. And in fact, the sense of ongoing connection is just very palpable. And it's important to those left behind. So I wouldn't worry. I don't tell people don't be too attached to them because you're going to hold them back. I think we need our attachments to continue. We need to feel the love and connection. They're fine. They're doing their own thing, and they're able to stay connected to us. But at the same time, I also advise people, your life can't just be around connecting to the deceased loved one. You're still here on this planet. You're still here for a reason. There's still people on this planet who love you and need you. So there's kind of a sense, again, this foreground background, that you need to be involved in this earth while you're still here, and you can also have this connection to those beyond. But you don't want to miss your life because you're so connected to those beyond. You want to be living. You're still here for a reason. So
it's a real balancing act, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And I've certainly heard people, you may have heard this, of, say, a young adult whose parent dies, and then they say a father died, and then they feel like they lost their mother too, because the mother is so grief-stricken. And basically it's as if they lost both parents, but only one left the planet. So have your grieving process, go through the valley of the shadow, but be prepared to come out on the other side and still connect with people. And often, many people find they're stronger, they're wiser, they're more compassionate for having gone through the experience. So keep your heart open. That's what I try to advise people. Keep it open to those who are here, keep it open to those who have passed, and keep it open to yourself.
There couldn't be any better advice, because no matter what we're going through, if we can have an open heart for ourselves and for those around us, we can support each other moving through it and move through it in a good way. But if we close down our heart, process stops, don't you think?
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And it's hard to keep an open heart. Sometimes we just want to shut it down. We don't want to feel. We don't want to hurt. But again, if you don't allow the sorrow, you can't feel the joy. And it's really just all part of the human experience. So if you just are tender with it, you get through it more easily.
Ashley, this has been absolutely wonderful. I'm sure our listeners are absolutely benefiting from your wonderful wisdom. Thank you so much for being on The Science of Magic.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge, comforted with love, and forever surrounded by those you love.